I'm here with Barbara Cochran on January 16th, 2024. And I think we should start at the very beginning. I think we should go back to October 16th, 1936. Let's start the day that you were born. Tell us about the first memories you have. Tell us about what you remember. You grew up in England, I'm told.
That's correct. I was born in St. Anne's Hospital. I don't know whether it's still there now or not, but my father was personal valet to King Edward, who abdicated the throne to marry American Wally Simpson. And it caused quite a ruffle amongst everyone because nobody had ever married a divorced woman before. But that's what he did. And my father worked for him. And once he got married, he lost his job. And of course, we lived off the Palace Gardens in a place called Charterhouse. It was a very large meeting place, but we lived in an area just beside it, in a little house. And then we moved into the actual Charterhouse, and from what I remember. And my dad would always tell me stories about his walking the Queen Elizabeth around the Palace Gardens. And she would chatter to him constantly about what she did in school and her classmates and all those kinds of things. And of course, he could never share anything like that with us about what they talked about because everything was private and it had to stay there. But he would tell me and my brother at the time that and my mom that she was nonstop chatter, nonstop, always had something to say. And then after Dad lost his job, he joined the Royal Navy and was in the Navy. And I think he got out in 1945, right after the war ended. And his ship was torpedoed and towed into Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. In Charleston.
Was his ship torpedoed while he and the crew were on the ship? So he survived, obviously.
Yes, he did. And what he told me is before they got off the ship, he had to run down and get his pipe and tobacco.
Wait. So the ship is going down and he runs down. Wow.
But it was finally recovered enough to tow it in to Charleston Harbor. And they repaired it there and opened it up to the general public. Well, in England, my father was a Mason. He belonged to the Masonic order. And a group of Masons visited the ship and made friends with my dad. And after the ship was repaired and he went back to England, there were two couples that he met, and they would send us gift packages with food and all kinds of stuff while we were in England. And then they finally persuaded him to bring us to the United States in 1947.
Yeah. What was and we'll cover a lot of ground from 1947 and your family, building its roots in the United States. But just if I could go back to when you were a kid, do you remember your father telling you or explaining how did he get the job with King Edward to begin with? I mean, that seems like a pretty difficult position to hold. What sort of led him up to being part of King Edward's staff?
Well, he was a caterer and worked in the food business, and he had applied for a job in Charterhouse, which was that large place where they used to have all kinds of meetings. And I forgot to bring pictures of my dad. He was in this fancy regalia with this fancy outfit on, and he would have to stand behind the dignitaries in the mansion house where they would have these large meetings with mayors, Lord Mayors of London, all kinds of visiting dignitaries. And while he was personal valet to King Edward, he would stand behind Edward at these particular fundraisers or whatever they were doing, discussing British royalty and the war and all that kind of stuff, the upcoming war.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fascinating that you have that lineage and that tie-in, and that you remember spending time around Princess Elizabeth, you said.
Yes. My dad, I think I was probably about 6 years old. And my dad took me into the room where Princess Elizabeth was standing. And she turned around and saw me and said, "Well, hello." Typical British voice she had. "Well, hello." And I remember that vividly. I will never, ever forget that.
Yeah. And
then, of course, the other thing that I will never forget are the during the actual bombing, because we would, when Dad was in the Navy, we lived in Kent, in Welling, Kent, county of Kent, because Dad wanted to get us out of London because of all the bombing that was going on there. It was just too dangerous. So he moved us away. And but the buzz bombs were still around. I mean, the siren would sound to take cover. And my brother and mother and I would stand out in the backyard and see these buzz bombs in the air with the fire coming out and the buzzing sound. And when the fire stopped and the buzzing stopped, it just started coming down, and you never knew where it was going to land. And of course, we had these great big outdoor shelters. They were ovals, and we had to dig a hole and go down into the dirt inside the shelter. Well, they finally decided that they were too dangerous. So they had us buy indoor shelters, and they were about the size of a queen-size bed and about, maybe 3 feet high, with the top a solid sheet of iron, and then iron surrounding. And the siren sounded one day, and my brother was 4 years younger than I was, so we were indoor in the shelter, and my girlfriend Edna, who lived up the street, my mother wouldn't let her go home because it was too dangerous. And so we were in the shelter, and my mother was attending to my brother, who was fussing and doing whatever. So she and I decided we were going to sneak outside.
Oh, man. See, we're just going to sneak outside during World War II. Don't mind us.
Outside,
kids.
We went down the garden path out the front gate onto the sidewalk. And all of a sudden, we looked up, and here was this monster coming over the top. We lived in a 2-story apartment there, a duplex. And here it was. It must have been at the end of the street, but it was so low, it was almost touching the chimney tops.
Yeah.
And you talk about 2 scared little girls. Oh my goodness. We ran screaming in the house. And my mother, I've never had such a spanking in my entire life. I'm telling you, it was unbelievable. But it landed, I'd say about 6 blocks away from us, exploded, and made a great big crater. And then all of a sudden, these great big chunks of iron falling out of the sky
Yeah.
from when the bomb had exploded. And they called it shrapnel.
Shrapnel. It is so fascinating. I mean, there's an entire generation, and you were right in the heart of it, of kids and children that it was normalized to just be in the middle of a world war. You're growing up watching missiles and bombs flying overhead.
Right.
What?
Well, we had to, when we would go to school, we would have to wear a gas mask on our shoulders. Everywhere we went, you had to have a gas mask. And when we got to school, they would have pretend air raids where you'd have to actually put the gas mask on and learn how to put it on and breathe through it. And this happened almost every day at school because you never knew when the bombs were going to drop.
Yeah. So now we go. We're a few years past the war, and you now have family connections in the United States who are sending over goods. What was it like? Like I moved when I was 7 years old from one city to another in Minnesota. You moved when you were 9 years old, or right around 9 years old, 10, 11 years old, to an entirely new country. So take us through that experience of just your family has now decided we're moving to the United States. We're moving to South Carolina. The war is over. What was that like?
It was very traumatic because I had a very strong British accent. And of course, over there, the education was so much more advanced. I mean, I had algebra and chemistry and biology, all of those higher up classes before I even came to the States. And I came when I was 10 and a half years old.
So they thought you were snooty with your education and your accent.
Well, that's right. The accent is what did me in, because I was constantly teased with an accent, and it was very upsetting because I felt like I didn't fit in at all. But eventually I got over that. But it was quite an experience. It's a very uncomfortable one.
Yeah. How long? So, I mean, you clearly got over it at some point because you built this amazing family and life and you wind up getting married. So when did you start to really feel like you personally were coming into your own, and maybe lead us up to, all right, marriage, kids, and that timeline?
Okay. Well, my father, as I was saying, was in the catering business, and he got many, many jobs working for country clubs. And he eventually moved up into being managers of country clubs. And we moved all over South and North Carolina, Henderson, Asheville, Charlotte, Raleigh, you name it. And I went to 12 different schools in 12 years because he moved so much.
Yeah.
And my last year of school was in Raleigh, North Carolina, Needham Broughton High School. And that's when I met my first husband, and we got married, and he got a job at hydraulic research out here and moved us out here. And that was in probably 68, because we moved to Canoga Park first. And then when he got the job up here at hydraulic research, he decided, well, he'll move the family up here. And then we moved to Santa Clarita, which was Newhall at the time, Newhall, California.
Okay. And so you take me through your college timeline. So were you married just out of high school then for the first time, and then went to business school?
No, I went to Mars Hill. It's called Mars Hill University now. It's a 4-year college, but when I went to Mars Hill, it was a Baptist college. It was a 2-year, and I took business because I was in high school, I was very adept at the typewriter. I mean, I was typing 135 words a minute. It was, that was my thing on the typewriter. And I thought, when we moved to Canoga Park, I thought, I need to stay at home with the kids, raise them. I didn't want to, I did work for an accounting firm for a while in Raleigh and did a lot of hiring and firing there. And then we moved out here to Newhall or Santa Clarita. And I decided, no, I need to stay at home and raise the kids. And so I connected with a friend of mine who put me in touch with Carl Warren and Company in Los Angeles. And they did a lot of interviewing people who were in automobile crashes and major medical problems. And they would send me, or I had to get a driver to drive down to Los Angeles to bring back these CDs, and I would have to type up the reports and have the carrier take them back down to Los Angeles. And I did that for over 30 years from home.
Wow.
And was able to stay at home with my family.
That's great.
And
yeah.
Then I divorced my first husband in 1975 and decided that I needed to get involved in my community, to do something besides staying at home and not knowing anybody. So that's when I became a volunteer. And I volunteered for, you name it, almost every organization then.
Yeah, Boys and Girls Club. Is it the Zonta Club? And at one point in 1983, you were chosen as the Santa Clarita Woman of the Year for your volunteer work and your community work. What are you most proud of in your life as a volunteer?
Becoming Woman of the Year. That was probably one of the proudest things. And it was a secret. I didn't know I was getting it because back then they made it a secret. For all of the men and women who were chosen, it was a secret. Nobody knew at the time who had been chosen to be honored. And when they called my name and Sam Garcia's name, what a shock. And the kids came in through the up at the back of the room, and I thought, what are my kids doing here? And then as they walked in, they announced my name and Sam Garcia's name because we were Man and Woman of the Year.
That's amazing. So did they give you a trophy, or what was do you have something still to sort of commemorate the moment?
Oh yes, I do. And I have wall plaques from Antonovich and from the governor, and you name it, all kinds of commendations, and they're all over my wall in my office at home.
I love it. And you've mentioned your children a couple of times, so I think this would be a good time too, to sort of in terms of timeline and just our conversation to talk about your three children, Dee Dee, the late Chuck, who we'd love to hear about too, and Scott. What do you remember about them? And if my notes are correct, there's about a 4 or 5 year age gap between the three of them from when they were born. Yes. What do you remember about your three children as children, their personalities? What do you remember about them?
Mostly riding motorcycles and bicycles, but mainly motorcycles. Because at the end of the street where I live now, this was before the 14 freeway was built. There was a big mountainous climb to get up onto the top. And the kids would go up there on their bikes or motorcycles, And they said, come on, Mom, you can make it. You can make it. Because I was always riding around below and they were up above. And finally, I finally made it up that hill without falling. And it was one of the most exciting things of my life. I loved it. I really did.
Well, I guess how old were they when they started riding sort of mini bikes
Mini
and
bikes
motorcycles?
when they were 3, 4, and let's see, 3, 4, and 6 years old. We all had mini bikes in Canoga Park.
Yeah. And
And
it turned into more than just a hobby as kids, right? I mean, isn't there a tradition of racing as your kids
yes,
got older too?
yes. Scott still races and rides, but Chuck, he was the one who took it to heights that not very many people do. He he did a lot of racing online. I mean, desert racing, and he rode in one race that a woman in France. She was a member of a Yamaha group, and she saw him out there racing and made friends with him. In fact, she's still alive now and living in Paris. And they made sure that he was sponsored by Yamaha of Paris. And but Chuck was he was excellent. He raced the Baja 1000, and it was during that time where he was recognized as being a very strong racer. And the representative from France was there, and she was in charge of Yamaha. And she approached him about possibly racing the Paris Dakar, that Yamaha of Paris would sponsor him. And that race was from the Eiffel Tower down through France and across to the opposite side to Dakar in Africa. I think it was about a 6,000 or 7,000 mile race. And he came in 4th overall.
That's incredible.
First American to race it. And yeah, I have a disc of the race, which is quite exciting. But
you must have been an amazing combination of proud. Were you nervous at all too? I mean, yes. I hear this and think, a 6,000-mile race. What were you feeling when you were?
Well, a lot of anticipation, but he would stay in touch. I would get a phone call from someone in his group telling me where they were and how they were doing in different aspects of the race, because they would have to stop overnight, that kind of thing. But yeah, that was the love of his life, was motorcycle racing. He he had so many girlfriends who always would call me and say, Chuck doesn't love me anymore. All he loves is his motorcycle.
Yamaha is his new girlfriend, actually. Yeah. So what can I ask then? He passed away in 1985. What happened?
He was racing in Tehachapi. He had broke his shoulder in a wreck and needed a blood transfusion. And the blood was tainted. And he got HIV from it.
Wow.
And of course, back then they didn't know what it was. Back in the early 80s, nobody knew what it was. But Chuck was in the hospital at watching TV when Rock Hudson died. Because Rock Hudson was the first major person who died of what they called HIV. And Chuck said to me, Mom, he says, I don't want to die. I don't want to die, when he saw Rock Hudson on there, because we knew he had a blood disease, but nobody knew what it was. But that's what it was.
Yeah, I can't imagine just how vibrant he clearly was racing at this high level all across the world. How did that then impact you and the family over the months and years that followed?
Well, we were very proud of him, and at the same time, a little bit leery of talking about it, because everybody would say, "Well, how did he die?" You know, and it wasn't a good thing to talk about, HIV. Of course, nobody cares anymore about it because it's mostly under control now. If you get it, it's very, very unusual. But I was constantly tested myself because I had been in close contact with him, and I didn't get it. The rest of the family didn't get it, so everything was fine.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I know that you have had a chance in your life to travel a lot. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
guess I'm wondering, I'd love to hear about just sort of, taking a different course here in our conversation, your travels over your life. When did you, I mean, obviously moving from one continent to another early in your life, you probably had a little bit of a travel bug implanted in you, but when did you start to get the travel bug, and tell us about all the different, I mean, we're talking almost all of the continents that you have been to, six continents,
Oh,
correct?
yes. The only two countries that Russ and I, my second husband, who passed away 4 years ago, um, he and I traveled all over the world. The only two places we didn't go were Egypt and Africa. And I've always wanted to do an African safari. And I think at my age, because I'll be 88 in October, looking at the information that a friend of mine sent me, because she's been to Africa to the safaris 26 times. She leads them. And I'm thinking it's a little bit too much for me at my age. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. And in fact, we were scheduled to go to Egypt when Russ had to go into the hospital, and I had to cancel the trip. And because I've always wanted to climb one of the pyramids.
Yeah.
But I've been down to Mexico and climbed that monster down there. So, or South America, wherever it is.
So when you travel, we're not, some people travel and they lay on a beach for a week and then they go
Oh,
home.
no.
You are an active traveler, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. And Russ and I loved riverboat cruises. We riverboat cruised all over Europe. And we went to France, to Paris on my 75th birthday. And I climbed the Eiffel Tower on my 75th birthday. Wow. Literally climbed it. And Russ said to me, "You mean you're going to pay to climb?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I'll see you up there. I'm taking the elevator."
Wow. And for you two to go back, when you were a kid, you probably didn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, get a chance to explore all these areas of Europe, especially because you moved when you were young. So what was it like going back, traveling, having lived in the United States for so long?
It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. And we went back to Northumberland because during the war, my my dad wanted us to move away from where the bombs were dropping, and we went up to my aunt's home in Northumberland, which is in northern England. And she would almost every day she would have a group of her lady friends come over, and we'd all sit in a circle and crochet. And we would make crochet blankets for the people in the men in the service. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that
love
was
it.
one of the things. That was one of the things that I enjoyed.
If you could, so your second husband, Russ, your travel partner, who passed away a few years ago, if you and Russ, you were both 100% healthy, you were in your physical prime, where is the one place you talked about you'd want to go on an African safari, something you haven't done. If you and Russ could go on a trip that you had been on before, what was your favorite trip? What would you like to replicate?
Probably go back to England and France because I still have family who are alive over there. Lots of cousins. And the other place, and Russ always told me, I'm not going on an African safari. You go by yourself, because he never wanted to go. And after reading all the information that a friend of mine sent me, I'm not capable of doing it now, not at my age. So
why didn't he want to go on the African safari? You know, afraid of the
he
animals, or what was he?
Yeah, he didn't. Yeah, he just didn't want to do it. He said, "Go to Africa on an African safari. We can go to the zoo and see the animals." I said, "No, I want to see them in person."
It doesn't get your heart pumping when there's a fence between you and the
I
animals, you know?
know, I know, and I think we went down to, I think there's a place in San Diego or down close to the border where they have an open area where they do have animals.
Safari, yeah.
It's a safari park, yeah. And I've been there, but it wasn't the same. Wasn't the same.
No, it's
Russ
too
said,
controlled.
This is good.
Oh man, I mean, it sounds so much like just, family means so much to you, and I've heard that gathering on Thanksgiving, gathering on Christmas Eve with kids, grandkids over the years has become such a huge part of your tradition. What are some of your favorite memories from those family gatherings over holidays?
Well, opening gifts, watching the kids open gifts, and the kids and grandkids and great grandkids all want to get in there and ruffle them up and open them up right away. And it's very, very hard to get them to wait a minute. It's not your turn. Wait for your turn to come, then you can open. Those two holidays are my favorites because
What's yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to ask, what is the nature of the family gatherings? What is how many people are usually, where are the family gatherings usually held over the years?
Well, we used to have them at my house in Newhall, and it got a little bit too much when Russ got ill, and we just couldn't handle it, and so we would go to Dee Dee's house and Scott's house, and have the occasion there in either one of the homes at the time. But that's what we do now. We came here for Christmas. And did we do Thanksgiving at Scott's?
No, we did it here.
We did it here? I don't remember. As you get older, your mind kind of goes bye-bye.
It does sometimes when you're younger too, as I can probably attest to that.
I got all my notes here and things that I've written up, in the past. So if you want to take a look at some of these papers, you're more than welcome to.
I would love to. Do you have any notes on your cats? You're talking to a fellow cat lover here.
Oh, my kitties. Oh, I love my kitties.
How many cats have you had in your life? And what was the first cat that you remember?
My first cat, I was in England, and her name was Muffy. She was a blue Persian. I've got a picture of her at home. The kids have seen it. And yeah, that was my first kitty, Muffy. And then I also did have a dog at some point, and his name was Tippy, Tippy. And I've had dogs and cats, but mostly cats. And I don't have them anymore. Ginger died, what, two 2 years ago. Yeah, it's been about 2 years ago. And she was 19. And
Wow.
I had her since she was 6 months old. And she had a sister. They were called Ginger and Spice. And as cats, they get kidney problems, very common for cats. And that's usually what they pass away from. And Spice passed away, it's been about 5 years ago now. And Ginger was last year. And I keep saying, do I want another kitty? But it's a little bit too hard for me to take care of a cat at this point, because I'm using a walker. I've beaten cancer twice.
Wow.
And this second time, it kind of did a thing with my body. First one I was 75, and then the second time was when I was 85. So it's kind of taking me down a little bit.
Well, and but think about as you're going through health issues throughout your life, or it could be anything, just how great of companions cats are. And I've been a dog and a cat person, so I understand both. But isn't it incredible? They don't ask for, well, they do ask for some things. Feed me now.
Yes.
But it's just you are their whole world. And
that's
it's
right.
Great to have them as companions.
They go to sleep in your lap. They go to sleep on your pillow when you go to bed at night. I know. And it was interesting because Spice loved Russ, and Russ would sit in his chair because he had back problems and couldn't sleep in a bed, so he had to sleep in the recliner. Well, Spice would walk over and put her paws up on the edge there and like, Dad, can I come up? You know?
Yep.
Meow, 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 meow. And he'd say, come on, and up she'd go and sit in his lap and stay there for the night. And then Ginger would come back to the bedroom with me. So Ginger was me. Yeah, I love her.
I love it. I love it so much. You also, in terms of passion, we were talking sort of before we started this conversation, this recording, that you have more experience in radio than I do. You've been hosting a radio show for 20 years it's called the Senior Hour,
yes,
right?
Yes, at KHTS in Newhall in Santa Clarita.
How did you get started in radio?
Well, it's interesting. I was a guest on one of the shows there because I had to talk about a fundraiser that my Zonta Club was putting on, and talking about that and how to get involved and that kind of thing. And then several months later, Jerry approached me and she said, how would you be interested in hosting a radio show? And I said, what? She said, yes. She said, your voice is very clear. Your enunciations are very clear. You can understand what you say very clearly. And we would like you to be a host. And I thought, whoa. And I finally said, yes, I'll do it. So that's when I did. And this is the 20th year.
Wow.
And tomorrow, all of the hosts are going to be on the show. We're going to have a show with all of the hosts. There was Don Gately, Dr. Jean Dorio, Dr. Thomas Pilecki, and me. And 4 of us are going to be there with the owner, and he is going to be operating the show and having us all speak about our experiences and why we got started and that kind of thing. So it's going to be very interesting.
That's amazing. In a typical, hour of the Senior Hour, what types of topics are you usually diving into?
Well, everything that we talk about relates to seniors because we have a very large senior population in Santa Clarita. And I happen to live across the street from Friendly Valley, which is an enormous area for seniors, where seniors live in apartments and houses and all kinds of things. And I also go to a group on Tuesdays, which I obviously missed today, but we have emotional and grief support groups that meet over at the senior center. And Russ and I were one of the founding members of that senior center over there. And so it means a lot to me to be involved with the senior center. And we talk about medications, illnesses, trips that seniors want to take, anything that is revolving around what seniors do, don't do, are good at, that kind of thing. And
I love it. You should send me. You should send me your show. You send me your show notes. I'll send you mine. How about
that? Well, you can listen to it, or you can see it on. I think it's on YouTube or Facebook. They have it. It's called the Senior Hour on KHTS. Yeah. You could look it up easier than I could send you stuff on it.
Isn't that funny that? And this is. I have a few final questions that I'd love to ask, and they could go in any different direction, but you bring up a radio show that's available on Facebook and on YouTube, and it's kind of a microcosm of how much the world has changed since before World War II in your lifetime.
Oh, yes.
You know, you just think about the advances technologically, but also just the, whether it's advances or changes, I guess, in society and the way people interact. And, how do you feel the world has changed the most for both the good and the bad over the span of your life?
Well, the good part for me is being able to remember what happened to me as a little girl. I mean, some of it was frightening. One particular thing is having the siren sound to go down into the stations. Well, we had a railroad station, underground railroad station, next to where we lived in Charterhouse. And we went down there. When we came back out, the home, the two-story home we were living in, half of it was bombed off. And my brother's crib was hanging over the edge.
Wow.
I mean, that's something I'll never, ever forget. And during those war years, lots of little things happened to me that I will not forget. And then but coming to the United States and living here and learning all about what went on over here and what goes on over here, it's incredible. It really is. It's just incredible. And I'm so thankful to be alive, to have a family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, 7 great-grandchildren now. And wow. I'm still alive. And both of my parents passed away when they were 70. And I was so scared when I turned 70. Am I going to pass away also, And just so thankful to be alive and have a wonderful family and have wonderful friends.
If we assume that you were very happy when each of your kids and grandkids were born and put that to the side, what is the happiest moment of your life? What is the moment that you recall back and think that's when I was the happiest?
When I married my second husband, Russ. He and I met in the early 70s. He was an elementary school principal, and part of his assignment as being a school principal was to get out into the community, because he had heard a lot from students that in classrooms he went to that their parents and grandparents didn't have any place to go, any place to stay, any place to be involved. And that's when he got involved, and we started the senior center. And I was also a hotline listener. We had a very active Santa Clarita hotline, and I would hear all kinds of things about women and men calling, wanting to know if there was any domestic violence shelters around that we could go to. And I was the originator of the domestic violence shelter that we started in Santa Clarita. And it's now taken over by Child and Family Center. And just being involved in my community and volunteering for so many different organizations, because everybody needed help. And I needed help, and I got help when I needed it. And that was what was so important to me, because the kids couldn't always live at my house. They had their own lives to live. And after Russ passed away, it was so great for me, because so many people that I had met helped me work through that devastating time of losing a loved one.
Yeah. What was your first date with Russ? Do you remember?
Oh, yes, I remember. Yeah, he took me out to, we have a Pleasant View, it's called, where they have disabled kids there. And he wanted me to go out to speak to them about what was going on in our valley and that kind of thing. And when we got back in the car, he said, well, let's stop and have some dinner. And he reached into his back pocket and realized he'd forgotten his wallet.
Oh, classic.
So I paid for our dinner. That was our actual first date.
Did you think he was pulling a fast one? Did you think Russ was a little bit of a cheapskate, or did you know he was good for it?
Oh, he was good for it. Absolutely good. He was an incredible man. Even Dee Dee and Scott and Lem will tell you that. They just adored him. And he was such a giving man. And I always, with my first husband, it was, no, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, you cannot do this or that. And Russ was exactly the opposite. He says, go, do what you want to do. I'm fine. I'm doing my thing. You go do yours. And then we do things together, which was, I mean, it was the perfect world, absolute perfect world. He was an incredible.
Yeah. What was your favorite quality about him?
His kindness and his lovingness, and always wanting to do something for someone else. That was the greatest thing.
Yeah. He sounds like a great man.
Oh, he was.
I have one final question for you here, just sort of a big picture question. What do you know now about living a happy and successful life as you look back on your years that you didn't know when you were 20 years old? If there's something that you wish you could tell a 20-year-old version of yourself.
Wow, that's a hard question. I would say take care of yourself, because that helps you take care of everybody else. As long as you have a happy outward look on life, you will be in good condition. And it's quite interesting, because Russ was quite the opposite from me. I was the optimistic one. He was the pessimistic one. And I think that's why we made such a good couple, because we offset each other, you know. And yeah, that's what I would say. Just be positive about yourself and do and go and be.
I love it. I love it. And it's been so great just hearing your life stories and the different places you've traveled to and the perspective you have on life. And I'm grateful that we had a chance to have this conversation, Barbara.
Thank you. Well, the riverboat cruises were the best part of the travel.
Okay.
Yeah, riverboat cruises. Yeah, I enjoyed talking to you. This was very interesting. I had no idea what to expect, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I feel like we probably could talk for another. I think we're just getting warmed up about 20 minutes in there too. We could probably do this for 5 hours. Couple of cat people. I didn't want to bring this up necessarily during the interview because it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about you. But my grandfather fought in World War II, and I wear his dog tag every day. And so I appreciate the history and from a different side of the ocean with where your family grew up. But that time in history is very fascinating. And the fact that you lived in the middle of it is incredible.
Well, my parents would take me to my grandparents' house when my dad would come inshore, and my mom would want to go and spend a weekend with him. And my grandfather, I used to call him Mini Hitler because he was a very demanding man, and his wife was Minnie, and she was always wanting to do things for him to help him out. I mean, he wasn't mean in as far as hurting her or anything, but he was just a very gruff. I want it now. Minnie, where's my tea? Bring it now. And my brother and I, when we were over there, we'd run out and hide behind the big grandfather clock because we were scared to death because he'd get his cane and whack it on the table. Minnie, bring me my tea.
That's not the way to get people's attention in 2024 anyways, but maybe maybe it was then.
Well, I'll get these things printed out and get them to you, because there's a lot of history in here. And I've only gone up to when I came to the States. I haven't gone further, but I've told you, and all of my volunteering and that kind of stuff. But I love life, it is inspirational, and the advice that you gave of what's the most important thing as you look back on living a happy and successful life. Take care of yourself. It's not selfish to take care of yourself. You're taking care of yourself so that you can be of more value to the other people in your life, and it's 100% spot on. Absolutely. Well, Phil, I've enjoyed it.
Thank you, Barbara.